Hey guys, what's going on? It's Broken Nose Gaming here. Now, I know I've done a few videos recently on PC builds, namely the pink budget PC and my personal rig, the blue PC. And I know in my PC build video, I kind of talked about how it's end of life, and I'm probably not going to be really upgrading anything else on it because I really am kind of at the end of the road when it comes to that system. I'm on a system using a 650 watt power supply that isn't 12 volt high power. I'm using a platform that's still DDR4 RAM, and I'm on an AM4 CPU. There's not a whole lot of things left for me to upgrade unless I'm going to overhaul the whole system. Now, my GPU is a RTX 3070 for the Win 3 Ultra from EVGA. If you remember, I bought this GPU right before EVGA announced that they were no longer going to produce graphics cards. They were going to kind of step out of the GPU market because of a disagreement or something they had with NVIDIA. So far, that card has done great. It's done just fine, even with a mild overclock. But part of me kind of wants to hold on to the 3070 and just keep it as like a display piece because EVGA doesn't make graphics cards anymore. Now, I know that's incredibly silly because it's a GPU, it has no real value. As a matter of fact, it's only going to depreciate in value as time goes on. I didn't want to keep running the 3070 knowing that it's not going to be replaced by another EVGA card, and I just wanted to hold on to this EVGA card because it's still in really nice shape. It's only had a mild overclock applied to it, and it really hasn't been used all that much. It was never mined on. You know, I don't do stuff like that to it. I just game on it and I use it for content creation. Eventually, the 3070 has come out of my system. So here is my 3070 out of my system. As you can see, it's still in pretty good shape. It's not dusty, it's not dirty. I took very good care of it. Like I said, it only had a mild overclock. As much as I wanted to keep using it, part of me was like, hey, you know what? Hold on to it. You know, it's one of the last cards EVGA made, and you know, sure, it's not going to go up in value, but you know, it means a little bit something to me that I got one of the last cards that EVGA produced. The only real downside about this 3070 is it is rather heavy. It was heavy enough to where I had to get a support to hold it up because it did start sagging eventually. So that's maybe one of the only reasons I would have taken this card out eventually. That being said, what card to replace it with? Well, you know, I wasn't going to get an MSI card. I thought about getting a Gigabyte Aero, but my system being blue and black and having literally just white RAM, I don't think a white GPU would have made sense. Then again, nothing in my system really makes sense, so let's not talk about that. But I ended up settling on getting a new card, and I ended up getting an Asus TUF Gaming RTX 4070 OC. Now, I didn't get a Super. Super and above requires a 16-pin 12-volt high power. But the 4070 was sold and manufactured with an 8-pin connector. Apparently, some AIBs decided to use the standard 8-pin connector, and it's a single 8-pin connector for their 4070s. The TUF Gaming was one of them. Now, it's not a huge step up, obviously. This is kind of like jumping from a 3070 to a 3080, maybe, at best. But I was fairly impressed with the 4070 only using a single 8-pin PCIe connector versus my 3070s too. So as much as I do like getting more performance, I've also been kind of interested in efficiency, which is one of the reasons why I stayed with a Ryzen 5700X, which is a 65 watt 8-core processor. And then also on top of that, I undervolted it and got even better thermals, performance, and power consumption out of it under full load. So that being said, my Asus 4070 only using one 8-pin connector, I think it only caps out at like 200 or 220 watts. I could be entirely wrong, but that's what I read on Asus's website. Now, granted, I did apply a mild overclock to the 4070 to get more performance than I was getting from a 3070, but using less power. I like efficiency. That's kind of the thing with this system now, is I'm trying to make it as efficient as possible while still being a pretty decent system. So a 4070 to me felt like an okay replacement. Now, in a world that we're now in, that EVGA no longer makes cards, I wasn't really sure what to look at when it came to these particular cards. The Tough Gaming 4070, like I said, uses an 8-pin, and it also had some pretty decent clocks. It was also boasting that it was an all-metal construction. So I was like, wow, okay, this is a pretty nice, card. So I ended up buying it. I got one that was on sale for less than $500. I did not pay retail price for this card. And I got it, took it out of the box, and the first thing I noticed was how incredibly light this card was compared to my 3070. So the heatsink doesn't seem to be as dense. The metal casing around it may also contribute to it being lighter, but I think it's mainly just the 4070's heatsink is not that big compared to my 3070's heatsink. The other thing I noticed was Asus's heatsink was slightly bent upwards. And I was actually really concerned about this when I first got it. I was almost debating returning it. But then I decided, well, I'm going to do some research. I searched up, RTX 4070, Asus Tough Gaming, bent heatsink, etc., and I actually got a lot of hits on Reddit. Not just the 4070, but their 4070 Ti's from Tough Gaming all seemed to have a bent heatsink that was slightly bent upwards, or in one extreme case, was bent at like plus 15 to almost 20 degrees, which is very concerning. I looked at what these users had asked the seller / manufacturer, and most of them said it's fine, don't worry about it. One company was like, we'll bend it back for you if it's really that big of a deal for you. The severely bent model Asus actually replaced for the consumer. They said that they should have been using it, but most everyone who had a slightly bent heatsink model ran it and there was no issues. The thing that's annoying to me is that just that sort of QC manages to get by. It's okay, I guess, to have a slightly bent heatsink, and in all reality, it probably really is okay to have a slightly bent heatsink. I've seen tower coolers that are slightly bent before, so I don't think there's a huge issue with it, but it looks kind of lame. And also, for the amount of money that you're spending, you probably wouldn't want a GPU with a bent heatsink, even if it's minute. But due to the fact that I paid less than retail, greatly less than retail, I wasn't really going to send it back and try my luck in getting an exchange. I said, let's run it. I did some benchmarking, I did some stress testing. There are no issues, so I decided to keep it. Now, the 4070, the Asus 4070, is a nice card. It is very efficient. I like that. It has the ability to run 0 RPM on the cooling fans, which I believe my 3070 did as well, but I did enable a fan profile with 0 RPM until my GPU hits about 40 Celsius, so there are some times where my GPU does not, even while playing games, does not ramp its fans up at all. Not a big deal. The other nice thing that the 4070 has is AV1 encoding, which the 30 series did not. AV1 being a nicer codec when it comes to encoding, and it's better quality, etc., etc. And I mean, outside of my slight disappointment with the QC, so far the 4070 has been a pretty good card. I wouldn't recommend it as a direct upgrade from a 3070. The performance gains aren't that great. As a matter of fact, I'll actually put a small chart with basically just some 3D Mark benchmarks between the 3070 and the 4070 up. As you can see, there's not a huge difference. It's maybe like 30-ish%. So you're not getting a whole lot of improvement on it. This was mainly just because I wanted to hold on to my 3070, and I wanted something that was maybe more power efficient than the 3070. 3070 was already fairly efficient. I only needed a 650 watt power supply for the EVGA version, and this 4070 also only requires a 650 watt power supply. But due to the fact I only have to have one 8-pin plug, it makes my system look a little bit cleaner. and you know, I'm kind of okay with that. It is a big card though. It is definitely thicker than the 3070 was, even though there's not as much density. There's a lot more open air in the card, which I guess is fine. It just lets air move through it more freely, better cooling. As a matter of fact, this GPU with the fan profile that I have only caps out at about 63 Celsius, so that's not too bad during benchmarks and gameplay, like heavy gameplay, like RDR2 or something like that. You know, overall, I'm satisfied, I guess I could say, with the 4070. That being said, there were some issues that I noticed with my 3070 as time went on. I had been using the EVGA Precision X1 overclocking software, and for a while it was fine, and then I noticed one day, like, I was playing a couple on games and I was getting a very large amount of like stutters and just dips and freezes. And I was really confused, and I was like, was it a new driver update that messed everything up? Like, what's wrong? Well, I opened up Precision X1, and my overclock, A, had been deleted, and B, the EVGA Precision software decided to cap my GPU's power limit at 30%. So literally the bare minimum that the GPU was allowed to be run down to. I don't know what caused that or why it happened, but it started happening more and more frequently, to the point where, like, almost every time I turn on my computer, I was double checking the EVGA Precision software. The downside is because EVGA has like these extra temperature sensors and stuff like that, I believe it only worked with the Precision software if I wanted to see all the different temperature sensors. If I would have ran it in Afterburner, I don't think I would have been able to see that. Afterburner would have obviously fixed the overclocking, deletion, and power cut issue, and as a matter of fact, I am using MSI Afterburner with my 4070 because I do not want to install any ASUS software. It's just too bloated in my opinion. The MSI Afterburner is just fine for doing just mild overclocks on the 4070. There were some weird things with the 3070 that I didn't notice until later on, and I'm not sure what caused it, and I don't know if it was a software thing or if it was a card thing. I never changed the card's BIOS. The card's BIOS was always in performance mode, so I don't know what was causing EVGA's software to drop the power limit down to 30% and then constantly delete my overclocks. I tried running an overclock scan and running a curve. I got way worse performance with that, so I stopped doing that. I just did a static overclock and left it alone, and it would just delete it. So I don't know what really caused that to happen with my 3070. But with that in mind, this is probably going to be my very last upgrade when it comes to this particular system. I am not going to get an X3D chip because I do not want to put a 105 watt CPU in my system. I'm not going to get any other GPU as of right now because I believe the 50 series, from what I've read online, and of course these are all rumors and speculations, but from what I've read online, all 50 series cards are going to have the 16-pin 12-volt high power connector. So that basically means I would have to get a new power supply if I wanted to get a 50 series card, because I did think about getting a 5070. But I just kind of sat here and watched the 4070 prices drop, and then once I saw one that was like ridiculously below retail, I decided to pull the trigger on it, and I was cool with that. That's totally fine. I would not recommend anyone to upgrade a 3070 to a 4070. If you're going to upgrade to a 40 series card, at least get a 4070 Super or higher. And if that's the case, you're probably going to have to get a new power supply. So it's probably not worth to upgrade from a 30 to a 40 series card. There are some people that say there is, because I do know my 4070 has 12 gigabytes of VRAM versus my 8 gigabytes that were on the 3070. So some people say that is at least worth upgrading to, because there are games that are starting to really make 8 gigabytes of VRAM start to work, partly due to just texture files, I'm assuming, and higher resolutions, and also partly because games are not as optimized as they could be when they're released. So looking at some of these AAA title games They're just not optimized that great. I believe Jedi Survivor is one that I have seen people talk about, saying that it is a very VRAM intensive game. So some people do say that having 12 gigabytes of VRAM in a 4070 versus your 8 gigabytes of VRAM in a 3070 is worth it. I do know the 4070's bus width is slightly smaller than the 3070's. You know, maybe the faster clocks and stuff make up for it. It does also use GDDR6X RAM. At least my version does. PSA, they are making a 4070 series card with GDDR6 RAM because apparently there is a shortage of GDDR6X RAM at the moment. So in order to alleviate this issue, there will be a 4070 GDDR6 version coming out. Just keep an eye on that. That's something to look for, I guess. If the price is lower, then hey, maybe it's worth it if you're upgrading from like a 10 or a 20 series. But I don't see a lot of positives when it comes to upgrading from a 3070 to a 4070. Like I said, I personally only did it just so I could remove my 3070 from service so I could hold on to it. There's a couple things that might happen to it. It might be displayed just because it's a nice looking piece and it's in very well kept condition. Or it might go into the budget pink PC and replace the GTX 1070 that's in there, even though I believe a Ryzen 5500 would probably have a hard time keeping up with that. Yeah, so that's just a little update about what I've done to my system. I am now running a 4070. I do enjoy the AV1 encoding. I do enjoy the extra 4 gigabytes of VRAM. But in terms of QC, I'm a little disappointed in a big company like Asus letting slightly bent heat sinks slide as an okay to run when you're paying several $100s for a graphics card. You probably want something that looks nice, but you know, it is what it is. Anyways, this will probably be the last update on my blue PC, and probably the last update that we talk about the pink budget PC for a while. This is really kind of the end of the line when it comes to things I can do to these computers. Anyways, thanks for watching. I know this was incredibly boring and it went on for way too long. If you watched the whole video, thank you for listening to me ramble about graphics cards and upgrading a graphics card that probably didn't need to be upgraded. Anyways, until I catch you guys in the next video, take it easy. Bye-bye.